gentlemen, to our conference and AGM for the 26th anniversary of the PSI or PPSD as we're previously known. As chairman of the group, I'd like to welcome you, all members and guests and friends, to our annual conference and AGM. Now, we've got a lot to cover today, but before we actually start, I'd like to clear the housekeeping items. Now, in terms of your mobile phones, if you wouldn't mind switching them off or putting them on silent. The fire exits. Now, fire exit at the end of the room, or all along the wall on the room next door. Toilets. Now, there are toilets directly as you come into the conference centre, immediately as you come in, both accessible and normal toilets. Now, if you have any special dietary requirements, the hotel will go around taking the menu or giving the menu during the morning session. So if you have any dietary requirements, please advise the hotel and please remain in your seat rather than changing and switching around, which will cause some confusion. An accessible bedroom is available if anyone needs privacy or feels unwell, and you can talk to Kerry on the information stand outside. And lastly, on the tables you'll find a schedule for the day, and we give evaluation forms. Now, if you could complete the evaluation form as the day progresses, rather than leaving it to the end. Now, I would like to introduce our main speaker for the day, and our main speaker is Deirdre Ryan. She's chairman of the Chronic Pain Ireland. I got that right, I think. Thank you, Deirdre. And we've given a profile of Deirdre and our speakers, Meredith, Raleigh, and it should be, you should have got it in your information. And outside on one of our stands, we've got all the information you're going to receive today. We've got all the chairman's reports, secretary's reports, etc. So you can collect those during lunchtime in advance of the AGM in the afternoon. Now, Deirdre is completing her studies as a parapsychologist and counsellor. She has played an active part in the mental health sector. She herself suffers from fibromyalgia and pneumatic arthritis. Now, I was talking to Deirdre earlier, and I was more or less telling her that my general prescription over a lifetime for pain has been 200 milligrams of Xylem, which works very effectively. Now, so I'm looking forward to the Deirdre's recipe, for example, for pain removal or pain reduction today. So I hand you over to Deirdre, who's going to divulge all our secrets to us.
No pressure then that everyone's going home pain-free today. That's a big order, isn't it? And I suppose before I even say a little bit about myself and start off, I will just say that I'd love to have the recipe to guarantee anybody no pain. But as an organisation, we don't really advocate for any one particular treatment over another. And what I'm going to be speaking about today is really about self-management strategies. So what are the day-to-day things that I can do that help me manage my pain better? And many of us, and many of you, I know I met you yesterday evening, came down the day before, for example, because you know it's too much travel, it's too much to do, too much listening to do, all in one day. Very simple example of self-management, because we know ourselves what it is we need. So when we talk about chronic pain, I'll just give a general introduction first of all, because there's a change coming up in terms of how chronic pain is viewed. The current statistic as to how many people actually live with chronic pain in Europe is around 1 in 5. The Irish studies rated anywhere between 19 and 35%, so we're somewhere in the middle of that. And I've lived with chronic pain myself for over 10 years, various different conditions. The list unfortunately has gotten a bit longer than what was said at the beginning there. And the working definition really of chronic pain is pain that either persists beyond the normal point that healing would take place, or it's not expected to take place. The pain is no longer useful. So for example, somebody has an injury, for example a back injury, the injury itself heals, but that pain that initially said something is wrong, you need to do something, stop moving, that initial pain is no longer useful. The problem then is in the messaging system. So the healing takes place, or it's not expected to take place, but those pain signals still come. And you're left in a body that's screaming out in pain, but they could scan you from head to toe and not necessarily find any particular cause, because the damage could be gone, or it's viral, so it's not easy to measure. And even for myself, in terms of arthritis, the markers aren't always there. Sometimes the inflammatory markers aren't, seronegative, as they call it. So this very much is an invisible disease. Every day people say to me, you're looking great. But people don't see me on the days when I'm not looking great. And from the lovely warm welcome I've received from everybody, I can see, first of all, that it's really like a reunion here today. You all know each other so well, but are very open about your stories as well, as in, it was great to hear so many people say to me this morning, thankfully I don't need to talk to you. Chronic pain isn't a thing for me. And that's what I love to hear, is when people don't need to talk to me. But unfortunately there is a percentage where pain very much is a factor. And it's a new lens that we need to look at the world through. Just as when I read the stories in Polio and Us, I could hear how even after treatment, after the many years people endured treatments, even as children going back, it was a new way of living life. How do I live now with various aids, with calipers, with, I maybe don't know my siblings anymore. So all the way along this journey that what really came across to me, and I'm not going to claim to be any expert on polio, you guys are the experts out there, I should be taking notes, that life is constantly requiring us to adjust. And I can relate to that in particular because, as I say, the diagnosis list tends to get longer. Unfortunately, it tends not to get shorter. And as everyone gets older, that tends to be the case. And like that, I felt like I had a handle on my condition, and then a new injury came along, and then I'm back, you feel like you're back to the beginning again. And when I heard about post-polio syndrome, that really struck a chord with me. Because you go, God, this happened when I was a kid or when I was a teenager. I've gotten through the worst of it now. I know how to cope. There's things that I do. My family understand it now. We're all at the same sort of point. And then maybe post-polio syndrome. So the fatigue comes in, pain comes in, and paralysis in some cases too. So that feeling of, I had a handle on something, oh, hang on a second, it's all changing again. So I really could connect with that. So why there's a change in terms of chronic pain is that if we're working with that definition, people weren't actually being diagnosed with chronic pain. It wasn't categorised as a disease in its own right, and that's changing. With the new international classification of diseases, they should all, the profile will be implemented by 2020. And every member state will sign up to it, and that's the international classification of what is a disease. And for the first time, chronic pain is going to be categorised under that. So as you can see, and they're behind me, they've broken it down into various different categories. And that means that, first of all, they'll be able to collect data as to how many people are actually living with this. And what it's really helped is open the floodgates to the hundreds of conditions where chronic pain is a symptom, and often the pain is overlooked. Say in conditions, say with maybe MS, or even with arthritis. People are fobbed off, told, listen, you're just getting older, you should expect pain, which is not right. We all deserve, no matter what age we are, good quality of life. And pain is the number one thing that's excellent at taking that away. So just a little bit about ourselves. We're around about 25 years. I know some of you probably won't even have heard of us. I've just been re-elected as chair. I'm going to grab my water, bear with me one sec. Because if, like you're on medication, you have dry mouth when I'm talking the head off, everybody tends to kick in. So, we're around about 25 years. I'm chair, bit of a Theresa May. There was no competition, I was just re-elected there for the second year. And what we do is we really try to support people find what's right for them rather than tell them what they need. We do talks all over Ireland, and I speak to groups like yourselves about how we can all manage better. And not necessarily just with pain, because I think the pace of life and expectations on us are only growing. Life has gotten much quicker, we have technology requirements. A lot of people can be left behind when life speeds up. So I think even if you're not living with a chronic pain condition, there's always tools that we can use to live better. And from my experience in speaking with people, around two areas in particular, pacing and sleep, tend to be the two most difficult for most people. I could talk to teenagers, they mightn't relate to the pain, but they can relate to the sleep because they're on their phones till whatever time in the morning, or feel like every time they get a notification they need to answer. So life is changing. So what am I going to talk about are those self-management strategies, as I said. We're also going to look around some common thought patterns that happen. And then around the grief process, because there can be a lot of loss associated with pain and with chronic illnesses. How can we build resilience? So we'll talk about the doom and gloom, but how is it that we build resilience? And really this is where I should be taking notes, to be honest, when I could hear everybody's stories and hear that this is a lifelong condition. And polio has enabled all of you to adapt to life and live well with it in many situations. So building that resilience has become natural to most of you, is what I'm hearing. Pacing and graded exercise plans, but how you can introduce changes gradually in a graded way as well. Okay, so these are what we would consider to be self-management challenges or strategies. And as you'll see, it's a full-time job. When people say to me, you don't look like you have pain, I say, well, you didn't see me on the drive down when I had to stop every hour for a stretch and a break and then drive again. Nobody sees the little things that we do day to day to cope better. I don't know if there's any fans of the Little Health Week out there, where they've any new sort of heated blankets or booties or heat patches and cold patches and all sorts of contraptions to try and help manage pain. I tend not to be able to walk past them, I have to say, sleep them. But they're all very simple ways of managing. Nutrition. Overall, the better condition our health is in, that less of an impact chronic illness can have. And it only supports our immune system, our stamina, but also how we feel in our own bodies too. There's many complications with a lot of medications, and often one of the most common side effects are tummy troubles. And people think, well, I'm getting pain relief, or this tablet is working for me, so I can't really complain about the kidney problems, the constipation. Who wants to turn up to a lovely conference like this and talk about constipation for the entire day? Not that many of you, and I'm not signing up for that either. But because of pain relief, or it helps us manage our condition, we feel like we can't complain, or we can't say that, listen, this is working, but actually, how do I manage the side effects? Because the side effects can be just as difficult to manage too, say with kidney stones and things like that as well. Relationships. I sort of tie the relationships, communication, stress reduction, distraction, socialising, they all sort of tie together. And the power that's in this room is that you know each other, you know each other's stories, that you hear that you're not the only one. Because pain is so isolating that organisations like this are so important. Because you guys, the experts, have the information. And when people get together, you give each other the status update and go, oh, have you seen such and such a one? Or have you tried this? Or swap notes. And that's so important. Relaxation. Distraction. There's a lot of buzz around mindfulness, I think, at the moment. I don't know if have we any mindfulness fans here? Meditation? We have a few? Okay. I'm sure you could tell me better about the sort of trends, as in what's come in and what's come out. Colouring was a thing for a while as well, and different things. But relaxation and distraction really can help. And one thing I heard from the stories was that the boredom that can come with being inactive. And I think when people have a flare-up as well, and when I say a flare-up, I mean the exasperation of the symptoms. So pain goes up, Inability to move can go up. Stiffness or cramps, they all go up. Fatigue goes up. And fatigue in particular can bring on pain too. So fatigue goes up, but the mood goes through the floor. So having those distraction things, the relaxation, having each other's number that you can give a buzz and go, today's one of those days, it's priceless. Journaling, exercise, mental health. You see, I'm coming from the mental health background, but until I could get my head around what was happening, I didn't really want anybody else to know. I didn't really want to talk about it. I wasn't ready to go to a wedding and everybody coming over going, oh, you're looking great, it's great to see you're fixed now and all of this kind of thing, It's hard to deal with. But what people often hear though is that you're getting older, it's all in your head, you just have to cope. Where really pain has such a huge impact on our confidence, how we feel in our own bodies, how we communicate about it as well. And I'm sure there's plenty of you out there going, well, I don't have pain. But life is changing all the same. And the things that we can put in place that help keep us well are just as important and even more important to how we react when things actually happen. So I remember before I had a total hip replacement, I remember they were sending me for all sorts of exercise classes and hydrotherapy and all different things. I go, well, you're going to completely cut the whole thing apart. What's the point of doing all of this, So, well, despite we're going to change everything, the strength that you built up actually stands to you afterwards. And I think that is particularly relevant with post-polio syndrome as well, in that managing that fatigue, the overall stamina and strength that you've already built up over the years, maintaining that helps cope with the syndrome as well. And being able to tune into those changes, because the first thought can be, oh, here we go again. Is this really happening again? But if we're almost expecting it, it's easier to deal with as it comes along. So lots of different challenges as to what are the day-to-day things that I can do. And these are some of the thought processes that we sort of look at. And this isn't just around pain. This can be any sort of event in our lives where my time is 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if anybody else has a time where maybe the sleep isn't coming, you're pacing, or you're down at the kitchen table at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's the time when everything goes around your head. The house is quiet, nothing else is happening. And you're going back over maybe all those arguments you had 20 whatever years ago, all those unhelpful things that go around the head. Catastrophising, this is never going to get any better. That pathway of, oh, this is not going to change. And it can be very hard to move out of those thoughts. Blaming ourselves, I know better. I know not to weed the whole garden and I did it, I'm such an, yeah. I know if I go out and once I get started I won't want to stop with the weeding and then I'll be out of action for the next week. So you have a good day, you want to use the good day and completely overdo it. Guilty as charged. The future despair, I think there's many groups that I speak to and there's always an energy that's palpable in a room. And I have to say, future despair is not one that comes with this group. Actually, the hope and the resilience is really what comes through. And the camaraderie of, even in the name of the organisation, that you're survivors. And there's great strength in that. I think a lot of other groups could learn from that as well, actually. The expectation of a cure. Before I knew anything about pain, I thought, okay, I'll go to my doctor, he'll give me something, he'll scan me, he'll see what's going on, I'll be fixed and I'll go back onto the road, back as normal. It's not that simple, unfortunately, as many of you tell me. And then the fear of re-injury, and that's something we're going to look at in terms of managing pacing and fatigue. That fear that can come, well, if I push myself that little bit more, I'm only going to do more damage. And how we can overcome that fear. So I can see this is registering with some of you. As we get to the more practical tips, it'll make more sense as well. So when we just talk about loss, I think with every ending, there's always a beginning. or for something new to begin, there's usually an ending. Just as if you move to a new home, chances are you've let go of another home. When a relationship starts, there's a relationship either with yourself or somebody else has ended. And we're all built to deal with loss. None of us can escape loss. We don't live forever. We all have a clock over our heads, so to speak. So we're built to understand what loss is. But there's many little losses that accumulate along the way, that when something big comes along, it can floor us. And changes in our health and our ability to live the way we want to live is one big whack. And why that's as big a whack is that it's all the little changes that went along with it. How people look at you. How one week maybe you could walk with a stick, and then another week you might need to use your chair. How with some of our members, they don't necessarily visibly look like they're in pain or have a disability, an invisible disability. They park in an able-bodied spot, and people come over to them and say, this is a disabled spot, you can't park here. So facing those challenges, being faced with the thought of, I'm not the person I used to be, or I'm not living maybe the way I want to live, that faces us every day, and we need to deal with that because it mounts up otherwise. So unfortunately, there's no end to this. If life didn't change, it'd be pretty boring, to be honest. It might be comfortable for a while when we got a handle on things and we knew that it was going to stay the same. But because there's no end to change, well then loss will face us quite often. And it can change. And because things are always changing, it's hard to commit to a particular plan. You go, well sure, I don't know what state I'm going to be in next week, sure, why will I start trying to do a bit more exercise? Sure, I don't know what, even tomorrow I don't know what state I might be in. Sure, the fatigue might be worse tomorrow, so what's the point of giving it a go? And we all get trapped in that kind of thinking. So there's that continual process of adjustment and readjustment. And as I say, you might look fine, even though you're trying to battle all of this.